a whole new Disney world.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Retroland. In 1937, Walt Disney Productions released its first feature-length film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. After the film became a financial and critical success, the obvious next step was to determine what their next feature film would be. In early 1938, Disney animators James Brodreau and Campbell Grant came to Walt Disney and pitched to him the idea of a film based off Kenneth Grahame's 1908 novel, The Wind in the Willows. In April of that same year, Disney acquired the rights to The Wind in the Willows and began production on the adaptation in April of 1941. However, due to a variety of issues at the Walt Disney Company, including the box office failures of Pinocchio and Fantasia, many animators getting drafted into the military during the early years of World War II, and the animator strike, which began in May of 1941, the Walt Disney Company was in financial trouble. In October of 1941, an ultimatum was reached with Bank of America, in which the Walt Disney Company could take a maximum loan of $3.5 million and would focus on animated shorts and finishing the films that were currently in production. Under this ultimatum, the Walt Disney Company couldn't start work on another feature-length film until the three that were currently in production, which were Bambi, Dumbo, and The Wind in the Willows, had been finished, released, and made back their budgets. While work had been started on The Wind in the Willows, after reviewing the footage that had already been produced, Walt decided that its quality was not at the standard needed for a feature film, and the project was shelved. In 1946, production on The Wind in the Willows began again, with its runtime being shortened to 25 minutes under the orders of Walt. Production was yet again halted in August of 1946, following a series of layoffs. The Wind in the Willows was later planned to appear in a package film called Three Fabulous Characters, alongside Mickey and the Beanstalk, and an original story by Roald Dahl entitled The Gremlins. However, The Gremlins was never produced, and Mickey and the Beanstalk was instead paired with Bongo and released as Fun and Fancy Free in September of 1947. Later in that year, it was decided to pair The Wind in the Willows with an adaptation of Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which had began production the year prior. In 1949, the film finally premiered as The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, now on video for the first time ever. It's a timeless classic movie with two fabulous characters who prove that making your dreams come true is the greatest adventure of all.
The final film had a similar concept to that of the proposed Three Fabulous Characters film, in that the framing device is quite similar, in which narrators tell stories about characters they consider to be the most fabulous character in either English or American literature. The narrator of The Wind in the Willows segment, Basil Rathbone, chooses J. Thaddeus Toad, Esquire, from The Wind in the Willows, and goes on to explain Toad's wild personality, as well as introduce us to his friends, McBadger, Rat, and Moley.
Still, for the most fabulous character of all, I would nominate a Toad. J. Thaddeus Toad, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind in the Willows. Toad, you might say, was the one disturbing element. Incurable adventurer, mad, reckless, tried everything, positive mania for fads, and he never counted the cost.
In summary of the story, Toad has started gallivanting around town in a gypsy cart with a horse named Cyril. McBadger sends Rat and Moley to talk with Toad and convince him to stop his foolishness. However, when they come to confront him, Toad instead develops a new mania, motor mania, and becomes obsessed with motor cars.
A motor car? Gad, what have I been missing?
Ratty,
It isn't. He hasn't.
it is, and he has. A new mania. Motor mania.
Rat and Moley attempt to keep Toad under house arrest until the mania has passed, but he escapes and makes it to Winky's bar, where he trades the deed to Toad Hall to a group of weasels for a motor car they had stolen. After being caught in a stolen motor car, Toad goes to court, and after Winky testifies that Toad tried to sell him said stolen motor car, Toad is sent to prison. We then fast forward to Christmas, where Toad is sat crying in his prison cell. There, he's visited by Cyril, disguised as Toad's grandmother, who gives him a disguise and helps him to escape prison. After being chased by the police, Toad makes it to Rat's house, where McBadger rushes in and tells everyone that the Weasels have taken over Toad Hall with Winky as their boss, meaning Toad was innocent. The four then devise a plan to steal back the deed of Toad Hall from the Weasels and prove Toad's innocence. They enter Toad Hall to find all of the Weasels and Winky asleep, but unfortunately wake them all up attempting to retrieve the deed. They then engage in an elaborate chase scene and manage to escape with the deed and reclaim Toad Hall, as well as exonerate Toad. After being a moderate success at the box office and doing well in re-releases, the film was overall well received. Right around the time of Ichabod and Mr. Toad's release, Walt was in the planning stages for his magnum opus, Disneyland. This would be a first-of-a-kind experience, a place where everyone in the family could go and experience the thrills and excitement of a young child on a carousel. This would be a place where anyone could experience the fantasy of fairy tales, the adventure of the African jungles, the futuristic world of tomorrow, and the wild exhilaration of the old frontier. For the land based around mostly his own work, Fantasyland, he wanted a thrilling attraction based on one of his most recent films. For this experience, he decided to theme it after the Wind in the Willows segment of The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Although it had originally been planned to be a roller coaster, Walt decided to instead make it a dark ride, so that everyone, no matter what age they were, could experience and enjoy every attraction at the park on opening day. This dark ride would be dubbed Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and open, along with the rest of Disneyland, on July 17, 1955. This original version of the ride, as well as the rest of the Fantasyland dark rides, proved to be a major hit with guests, and were considered by many to be the highlight of the park in its early years. This popularity led to each of the opening day dark rides from Disneyland's Fantasyland making their way to Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom for its opening day on October 1st, 1971. Magic Kingdom's version of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride was unique in that it had two different ride tracks, each with a separate yet similar experience. Upon boarding your motor car, you would either end up taking the right or the left track. On the right track, the ride would start with the motor car crashing through Toad Hall's library, passing McBadger at his desk, as well as a falling suit of armor, before breaking out of Toad Hall and passing through a barnyard, where you encounter several upset animals before plowing through the henhouse, after which you pull onto a one-way street full of warning signs, which leads to the town center, where your vehicle takes a hard right into the police station and through the jail, and out into a shootout between the police and the Weasels. Your motor car then pulls out onto the train tracks and is subsequently hit by a train. In the final scene, you take a trip through hell. Literal hell, where devils bounce around and cackle at you. On the left track, you yet again crash through Toad Hall, but this time you pass through Toad's trophy room and the kitchen, before breaking through the wall and heading through a gypsy camp. Your motor car then pulls down the same one-way street and passes through the same town center, but instead takes a left into Winky's bar. You then pass by Rat's house, where you can see Rat and Molly before being hit by a train once again and ending up in an identical version of hell from the right track. In 1983, the entirety of Disneyland's Fantasyland was updated. This update ditched the medieval tournament tent look that had persisted since opening day, as well as gutting and updating each of the opening day attractions with brand new effects, ride systems, and facades. The outside of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride was now themed to Toad Hall, and the queue became the front room of the house. This update also reworked the show scenes and layout, as well as adding several effects from the Florida version of the ride. After boarding your motor car in the front room of Toad Hall, you pass through the library and past McBadger, before passing a falling night similar to the one at Magic Kingdom. You then blast into the halls, where weasels are hanging from the ceiling, and fly through Rat's house, where Molly is eating a meal. Your motor car is now out in the town, where policemen attempt to stop you, to no avail, and you narrowly avoid crashing into the river. You then pass through an explosives warehouse, where an explosion blasts open a brick wall, which you go through and end up in Winky's Tavern. You then pass through another short section of town, where you cause damage and harm to the townsfolk, before passing into the courthouse and being sentenced to prison by the judge. You pass the prison tower and are yet again hit by a train on the train tracks. Finally, you go through another version of hell, complete with bouncing devils, a demonic judge, and a fire-breathing dragon. Unfortunately, On September 17th, 1998, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at the Magic Kingdom closed for good and was replaced by The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh on June 4th, 1999. Fan outcry at this closure was massive, and petitions and protests were plentiful, but the decision had already been made. While the Magic Kingdom version might be gone, the original Disneyland version remains to this day, and will hopefully stick around for a long time to come, so that future generations will be able to join Mr. Toad on his wild ride. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Once they are okayed, the thousands of pencil drawings go to the inking department. Here, hundreds of pretty girls, in a comfortable building all their own, well lighted, air-conditioned throughout, cover the drawings with sheets of transparent celluloid.